Welcome, everybody. I'm Brian Tausig-Lux from Untours, and I'd like to welcome you to our barge event today. We're joined by James Waggot, who owns the Savoir Vivre barge. He's going to be giving a presentation that'll last about a half an hour or so. At the end of that, we're going to have some time for questions and answers. And at that point, we'd like you to put your questions into chat today. We've got a very large group. So if you could put your questions in chat at any point, you can do that during the presentation or during the Q&A. We will then have James answer those questions. We've also got Dodge Amaral with us today. He directs our France Untours. So if there are questions specific to certain things, certain aspects of the barge experience, we may direct some questions to Dodge. During the presentation today, we're going to ask you to keep yourself on mute, if you would. And once we start the presentation, please turn your video off and then turn it back on once we end and we're at the Q&A portion. That will save some bandwidth and allow James to give his presentation without any hiccups. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to James, and James, you can take it away.
Brian, everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm actually in the UK right now. I'm in York, UK, so old York to New York, and we're in Yorkshire. So it's actually 5 p.m. here. Had a busy all day, and the whole target of today was to be in time for this meeting. And I made it with 10 minutes to spare, so mission accomplished. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity, Dodge and Brian, for putting this together. I think it's really innovative. It's a nice opportunity for an operator to speak to people who might be interested in barge cruising. Often there's a bit of a veil between the operator and the brokers and the travel agents who specialize in helping people find nice holiday experiences. This is a wonderful way for us to speak to you directly. I own a boat called the Savoir Vivre, which is a luxury barge hotel based in France. I found out about it through a family, and it seems to be the way in barge cruising, is that often the family relationships in terms of operators and owners. But I had the opportunity of going on something called a luxury barge cruise many years ago. And then traditionally, I'll talk to you about what's happening here. France has some beautiful waterways, which I'll show you some pictures of in a moment. And a very nice way to cruise along those waterways is by way of a vessel. And these are typically converted barges that traditionally used to move things like coal and grain. And from Dijon, it would be mustard seed, from field to processing and onwards. The idea of going barge cruising is the idea of just enjoying these waterways that wend the way through the countryside of France. And traditionally they were traditionally still are, pretty luxurious experiences, where you typically will have a 128-foot vessel catering to something like 8 guests. And you might have 6 or even 7 people looking after you. And this is where this idea of ultra deluxe barging happened. And typically speaking, the rates for those sort of cruises might be $6,000, $7,000, or $8,000 per person per week. Weirdly, I had the opportunity of experiencing one of these luxury barge hotels, and like many a new venture, it was born out of a degree of frustration. In that we were cruising through these lovely waterways and through these ancient villages, but I had the provision of a private chef. And I was fascinated by this because I wanted to see all these local restaurants that were passing. And I happened to be doing an MBA at the time, so I made it my project to look into this. And what I found, and this is in terms of the business of tourism, before I talk about my specific boat, is I found that people's relatively high-end tourism trends are well established, but also changing. And essentially what's happened over time is that the traditional methods of luxury are changing for affluent older tourists. Affluent older tourists, frankly, they live longer now. So to a certain degree, affluent older tourists tend to be live younger for longer. So things like crew ratios and overly elaborate forms of luxury, maybe gold-plated taps or chandeliers or grand pianos, or very high crew to guest ratios are to a certain degree falling out of favor. And increasingly, what I was finding when I was researching the Savoir Vivre was an increase in interest in terms of things like words like authenticity, sustainability, and contribution. The idea of traveling somewhere and really experiencing what the place I'm visiting is like, rather than visiting that place in the highest level of luxury possible. And from that was a barge business born, and we've been operating for about 10 years now. My friends call me the barge bore because I love talking about luxury barge cruising. So this is an absolute pleasure for me to share with you. What I'll do, if you like, is just give you a quick glimpse. I've got just some pictures. Don't worry, I'm not going to kill you by PowerPoint here. I'm going to share my screen, and then I will go to the presentation. There it is. I go here, and I hit share. And I hit Yeah, so here's a scene from France, and this is along the Burgundy Canal. You can see in the foreground the canal. On the side of the hill there, you see the Châteauneuf-en-Auxois. This is a stretch. This is a stretch of the Burgundy Canal along which the Savoir Vivre, my boat, cruises. And as I said, the Burgundy Canal was begun in the late 1700s, and it was completed in the early 1820s, 1830s. These waterways were the motorways, the freeways of commerce at the time, and it created great enrichment for the people who benefited from them. Whereas things were by horse and cart and trail, now the volume and weight of goods that could be transported far more efficiently created much of the economic prosperity that the area enjoyed. And typically, just like with the roads and railways, they find their way along the path of least resistance. And this is along a valley called the Ouche Valley. So this is the Valley du Ouche. And along here, on the side here, you have a chateau, which is an ancient chateau called Châteauneuf-en-Auxois. So in terms of within this world of barge cruising, I'm going to show you, there is a lovely marriage within Burgundy, because Burgundy is in itself a beautiful place. Many people who visit us really enjoy wine. And as you can see here, there's very, very famous, some of the most famous winemaking in the world. Burgundy wine production represents a tiny fraction of the wine that's served or produced in France, but in terms of its value, it's some of the most exclusive and most revered. It's nice for that reason. There's architecture, there's history, there's chateau. Here's an area called the Abbey de la Boussière, which is on our cruise route. Again, this sits next to the canal. So all these historic buildings are just next to our cruise route. The other nice thing about Burgundy is its location. It is warm and dry throughout the season. It is, frankly, it's a little miserable during the winter, which is why it rains so much, which helps keep the winemaking so buoyant, because it has a beautiful example of southern-facing slopes, poor quality soil, and 4 proper seasons, which means that the vines have to work. So they really set down long roots into this poor soil, which gives its special minerality. Along the canal, we go along through locks, which we go up or down the canal with, and every single lock has a lockkeeper's cottage, which is they're often populated in Burgundy by people who rent them and look after them. The lockkeepers now move around on mopeds and electric mopeds rather than living in the lock houses all the time. Here is my boat. This is the Savoir Vivre. The Savoir Vivre is an 80-foot ship vessel it has a capacity for 8 guests. And it looks like a boat on the outside. Inside, it's more like a 5-star hotel. We have 8 guests, and the accommodation is split over 4 identical staterooms. And each stateroom has either queen or twin convertibility. So here we're in the queen format. Those boats can be separated into a twin format. Space is always at a premium on a boat, but in terms of the quality you have, what you're looking at is an orthopedic mattress. We have electric adjusting beds. Each room has digitally controlled air conditioning. We have a hot water loop providing lots of hot water. There's towels, slippers, hair dryers. It's a fully hotel-like specification, but spread over 8 cabins. Each have their own private facilities, including heated towel rail, heated mirror, and all that jazz. The reason I'm talking about this is 8 guests is very normal for luxury barge cruising, but in the traditional format, which I was introduced to back in 2005 to 2006, was traditionally what you do is have a private chef. And when you go cruising aboard the Savoir Vivre, you'll typically wake up and you'll be underway under a stretch of canal and have a breakfast aboard. And then the traditional format would be to have lunch aboard and then have an afternoon excursion, for example, and go taste some wine or visit a chateau. And then you enjoy dinner on the boat again, where you have the services of a private chef. Now, whilst that is, well, having dinner made for you by a professional chef is always wonderful. If you're going to France, if I thought about what France was exciting about, it's history, its culture, its wine, its gastronomy, and all these things. And the seed of thought that went in my head is, well, if we've come all this way to come to Burgundy, why don't we visit those restaurants rather than eating from the hands of the same chef all week? So what we did with the Savoir Vivre is, you'll notice that the boat is 80 feet, not 128 feet, and we're over 1 level, not 2, which means it's a relatively smaller vessel. And by doing this, what we're able to do is make some decisions in terms of the amenity that guests enjoy. And if you look at the screen here, it's a very nice environment, but also to maybe reinvest into what people are wanting. And when I was looking at the idea of authenticity, sustainability, and contribution, the idea was to instead shake up the program a bit and do something that's a bit more immersive. And the way we've done that is with our food program. Every morning on the Savoir Vivre, it's one of my favorite things to do in the world, is when I have the pleasure of being aboard, is that we wake and have a continental breakfast whilst underway. Fresh coffee or fresh squeezed orange juice while we're plying the canals is a wonderful start to the day. And then by lunchtime, we're ready for lunch. Maybe we'll go for a morning tour that day, or maybe at the afternoon. I'll talk about those a little bit later on. And then coming to lunchtime, we have a private chef who delivers the lunch service to the boat. And it's supplied by a local restaurant, one of our restaurants that we join in the evening at the Abbaye de la Bussière. They actually have a Michelin-starred kitchen, and they also have a bistro. And also, the owner's a terrific guy, and his chef's a very helpful man, and they love the boats because we bring life to the canal. So they've agreed to provide our lunch service, and they deliver our lunch service to us every day, and we have lunch aboard. Now, in the afternoon, depending what the program each day is, we'll either do some more cruising in the afternoon through the canals and locks of along the Ouche Valley, or we'll have a tour depending on what the program is. For example, we visit Dijon one morning for their market day, and that's best visited in the morning. Whereas when we go taste some wine, more often than not, people like having their wine after lunch rather than just after breakfast. So we have an afternoon tour with our private tour guide, which is either going to be Laura or her husband Simon, who I've both known for. Everyone I've worked with in the Savoir Vivre has been with us for 8, 9, 10 years. So we're well established, and we really work the whole business on the basis of trust and mutual respect. And they're terrific people. Now, rather than have a private chef in the evening, what we've done is sack the chef aboard. We have a crew ratio of about 3 to 1 aboard the Savoir. Three crew to look after 8 people, rather than these more exorbitant 4, 5, and 6 guests. And by doing that, what we're able to do is reinvest in the experience. And rather than eating from the hands of your private chef on an evening, we get off the boat. And this is one of the big things that we've done differently with the Savoir Vivre. And it's one of the big things that drew us to untours and untours to us, because their format of really kind of trying to reduce the structure of holiday experiences, and to reduce the degree of the formality, but up the idea of maybe having surprises or enriching it and having a more immersive and authentic experience. We get off the boat every night. We go to a different authentic local restaurant. This is a bastion of the French culture. With us, you eat from the hands of a different chef every evening. And our food program varies from really quite ornate places, such as the restaurant Gourmand, where there's a very interesting chef who's doing very great things. He was trained at the Savoy, to the Abbaye de la Bussière, which is along our cruise route, which they have a Michelin star room, and we dine in their bistro area, to more modest places. For example, near the Châteauneuf-en-Auxois, in that village where I showed you that chateau, we we visit a creperie, which is a Britannic kind of from Brittany, and the idea of a restaurant basing its fare from something as humble as a crepe. And we do this in delivery, not just in terms of the variety of French dining experiences, from the formal to the informal to the local to the congenial. And it's this variety that we've sought to have in every week. We draw on about 8 restaurants because every week we need to find 6, but often there's either seasonal closures or a wedding or an event or whatever it might be. So we have 8 trusted restaurants that we kind of we visit throughout the season. The upshot is, in terms of the idea of sustainability and authenticity, is, rather than a double glazed experience of living on a luxury barge hotel, we have a private chef. It's a more immersive and arguably authentic. You're dining with French people in the French restaurant, and you're also supporting an independently owned restaurant. Every single one of our places that we visit, the chef is typically the patron, and these are wonderful people who they run these businesses for love rather than the money, and they're terrific places to visit. Here, for example, is the Au Petit Repère du Go, and this is our creperie run by a lovely couple, and it's a busy old restaurant, and it's one of our more modest but enjoyable ones that we go to, less formal. All the way through to here is the Abbey de la Boussière, and this is the brasserie area of the Abbey, which is also, and by the way, we operate on a completely inclusive basis. So once you come aboard the Savoir Vivre, notwithstanding your crude gratuity, which is totally optional and greatly welcomely received, of course, as always, really, we cover everything. That includes all the tours, all the costs of running the ship, all our lunches and our dinners, throughout the week. So it's also one of those ones where it's quite relaxing, because every time we visit a restaurant, we'll introduce you to the restaurant, what the menu is, what we might recommend. So it's one of those ones where that you're going into a place that you can trust, because they look after us 25 times a year, and the reason we keep using them is because they keep their standards nice and high. I include this picture because this is this is the idea of, in terms of understanding what's happening when you eat from the hands of different chefs. So this is literally the chef. This is the guy. His name escapes me right now, but he's the chef at Barge Community, which is one of our menus, one of our restaurants. And he's a terrific guy. He's very innovative. He tries different things, and throughout the season, he'll try different things that are seasonal. Whatever comes in at market, you'll find that gets represented on his menu. And speaking of him, actually brings me on to a couple other major people. That's the people who run the Savoir Vivre. I am very, very proud of the Savoir Vivre and what we do aboard it. And I'm also very, very proud to know that the importance of me staying out of the way. Discovering Burgundy, conceiving the Savoir Vivre, and putting this product together is an entirely different skill set from sharing the beauty and the experience that is a cruise in Burgundy. To that extent, I've worked with Richard, you see on the left there. He is the captain of the Savoir Vivre, and he is a trained chef and a boat pilot, and he's been involved in barging as long as there's been barging. In fact, his parents were the chefs aboard the very first luxury barge cruise back in the mid-80s. His brother owns a boat. His sister married a man who runs a boat. And his son is his brother's son is currently training to be a boat captain himself. So it runs deep in the Maigret family, which is Richard's family. He's a super guy. He drives the boat. He looks after everyone's safety. And when you meet Richard, you realize that you'll spend the rest of the week laughing, because he's got a cracking sense of humor, and he really knows how to turn something from a good experience to one that you'll remember for the rest of your life. The other person there is Laura, and she's our guide. Laura is also a master of wine, and so is her husband, Simon. Laura and Simon come as a pair. They're both experts within the world of barge cruising. They've both worked on ultra-luxe boats, the very best boats, and they've since had a family. And her way of coming back into barging, because traditionally speaking, the crew live on the boat, because of our alternative formats, Laura's able to go home to look after her family every evening. And the magic about that is that we get to have her skills looking after us. Her and Simon's tours are amongst the best in the industry. And as ever with these things, I think people like to choose their accommodation, but what they remember is the people they met. And to this extent, you're incredibly good hands. I love the barge cruising industry. We are a proud member of it in the Savoir Vivre. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll come back to you now. I'm back. Yeah, I love the barge cruising industry. It's a community along that canal. So whilst we are competitor boats, make no mistake, we're in it together, because really, when you look at what's happening with barge cruising and the wider cruising industry, there's lots of things that float and we can call them all boats, but the actual cruise experience we enjoy from them varies vastly, from the large ocean-going cruise ships where hundreds or even thousands of people are aboard, to inland waterways cruising. And to that extent, there's things like the river cruising scene in Europe, which are the Viking ships, they call them. And Viking is the company. And those are maybe 60 to 160 passengers. Luxury barge cruising, 6, 8, 10, sometimes 12 passengers aboard. So in terms of, well, what's happened, we're finding is because of what's happening within tourism and within health and safety, and dare I say the COVID word, people are really have been on hiatus from traveling internationally and actually traveling in groups. But one thing we found is that there's a renewed and appreciation and excitement about small boat cruising. And we're talking small boat cruising, such as doing a private charter among the Savoir Vivre. Or what we're really popular with is when guests hire a cabin or 2 cabins and join other guests who have taken a cabin. And I think what's happened there is people say, well, what if I don't like the people I'm with, or something like this? It's quite an interesting process, is that we've become, I think, probably 40 or 50% of our cruises, through working with people like Brian and Bob, are what we call hotel weeks, where people take a cabin rather than charter the whole vessel amongst them, their family or friends. And a couple of things that people say, well, how does it work? And I said, always it works. And the reason being, and we realized, is by the time you end up being interested in this thing called barge cruising, and this idea, the point you want to go to France, and by the time you choose a boat like the Savoir Vivre, which is not necessarily heavily focused on amenities, but the barge that's been more interested in turning up the volume a bit in terms of authenticity and experience and sensations of contribution. So by the time you're interested in going to France, by the time you're interested in barge cruising, and by the time you choose the Savoir Vivre, and frankly you can afford to go on the Savoir Vivre, there's a sort of pre-selection takes place of terrific people. And more often than not, then the people who meet on these hotel weeks often become friends, and the weeks are good fun, and we love putting them on. The things that we may have worried about just simply haven't come to pass, and we think it's because of sort of natural the selection process that takes place by the time a group of 8 people join the Savoir Vivre. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is rates, and then I'll probably be about done with what I was going to cover, but I'm happy to talk more. The Savoir Vivre, we sell cruises in 2 ways. We offer a whole boat charter, which is from a Sunday afternoon to Saturday morning. Sunday afternoon is great because either if you arrive in Paris, for example, even a couple of days before or on the day, you have a 1 hour, 45-minute TGV train, which takes you straight into the city center of Dijon. So you get from the city center of Paris to the city center of Dijon via the TGV, train Grand Vitesse, which are their 200-mile-an-hour trains. So that in itself is an experience, but also it just means that the transfer times from Paris are very, very convenient. But from the Sunday afternoon to the Saturday morning, 6 nights aboard the vessel, and our whole boat charter rate is $32,000 for 8 guests, which works out at our per passenger rate when we do a hotel week, which is $4,000 per person per week. And we're still at 32,000 and 4,000 now. As Brian knows, he receives our chart. We're just about full for the 2022 season, save for we have a hotel week available. And depending on whether we get sufficient interest for this year, we'll open up another hotel week. But really from 2023 onwards, we're taking inquiries now. And I'm sorry to be joining everyone else, but we're under pricing pressures around us. We're going to move the charter rate from $32,000 for 8 guests to $34,000 for 8 guests, or per passenger to go from $4,000 per person per week to $4,250. Currently, we're still accepting our current rates. I think we'll likely move to the 2023 rates, probably beginning of April, perhaps May. We really want to get the 2022 season zipped up and on its way. And then once we enter into the cruising season, it's my job to stay out of the cruise way and let them get on with delivering amazing cruises. I think I've covered barge cruising. I've talked about Burgundy. I've talked to you about why I love this business. I've told you about why I love my boat. And I've told you how much it is and the people who run it. I think as a first pass, I think that's my first pass so far. Brian, is that something that getting close to what you might have want me to cover?
Yeah, thank you, James. This has been really interesting, and I'll just underscore something. We've worked with the Savoir Vivre and James for a number of years now. I don't know exactly how many, but we've had we wouldn't be doing a presentation like this if we weren't really confident of the quality. We've had lots of guests who've gone. We've had at least one couple return for a second time with a different with some other friends or other family. It's that kind of experience. So we feel really confident, and we've had a huge level of interest this year in the Savoir Vivre. So I thought this is something that other people might want to know before 2023 gets completely sold out. So thanks for that, James. And now we're going to open up for questions. So put your questions into chat. We have our first question from Kimberly. What age range is the affluent older cruiser?
I was talking, I was guilty of talking demographics, and they can be cruel things. However, I'll speak as a boat operator, and traditionally speaking, with the ultra deluxe boats, these are often the wealthy and the very wealthy, and they tend to be of retirement age, and also and older, and to the point where really very affluent older travelers need a lot of help because they're less mobile and things like this. The Savoir Vivre is a younger game. I'd say that in terms of when we welcome families aboard, in which case it's a full mix there. But anything really, our guests for a full boat charter, it's 40 plus typically. The 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. That's going to be our tranche of our main customer base. We depending on circumstances, one thing I haven't mentioned is one of the nice things about the Savoir Vivre is that we're all on one level. And if you see, save for 2 treads on the foredeck and also 3 treads from the wheelhouse, we have to enter the wheelhouse at one of our moorings where the canal side's slightly higher. Save for 2 treads on the front or 3 treads at the back, the Savoir Vivre is on one level. And that is nice when there's mobility issues with guests. We found, I don't might have been yourself, Brian, over the years, but we are typically represented when there might be an issue with stairs or being a mobility issue. By being on one level, it gives us good accessibility around the ship, regardless of age. But we tend to attract a relatively young crowd by way of barging terms. But starting in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, that's our core, I'd say.
Great. Okay. By the way, feel free to turn on your video, everybody. I'm going to actually switch us over so that we can see each other a little bit more easily. But in the meantime, next question from Jay. I don't drink wine. Do you have rum on board?
Yes. That's a classic. Yes. We have the bar aboard the Savoir Vivre is inclusive and relatively extensive. It's really a question of space, but we have premium liquors available all week and beers and various wines, and all the wines are included. Typically, we're in Burgundy, so we're there to celebrate Burgundy wine. And people who come on our boat are either know about wine or often curious to know about wine, or in this case, probably coming with people who might be more excited about wine. But there's rum aboard, there's everything. We originally thought about putting ratios of this, that, and the other and having certain ones available. But I quickly learned about 10 years ago that when you have an inclusive bar, it doesn't matter whether it's free or not, we still get the same hangovers. So whatever people like, we can get hold of, but it's a premium and unlimited bar. And critically is that we really focus on Burgundy wines. We'll get some wines from other regions, of course, just to share and contrast. But we have cellar door arrangements with certain winemakers, which we get outstanding wines, and they're open and inclusive all week.
Great. Okay, what months have the best weather? This is from Janet.
Yeah. Okay. It depends what you like. Either end of the season, in the spring and the autumn, it can be glorious. It also can be a bit Burgundian, and you just have to be dressed for the weather. But the sweet spot from May, June, July, August, and September are consistently wonderful. August is probably the hottest month, but we do have strong air conditioning in the boat and in our. For our tours, we have a private bus, and we go in our bus, and that's got powerful air conditioning. But yeah, just like a northern hemisphere summer, once you hit May onwards, it's consistently glorious. And if it does rain, it knows how to rain in France in that area, so it will rain and then it'll stop raining. Coming from the north of the UK, we're from the land of the all-day drizzle. It's less like that in Burgundy. A weather cycle may come through. That's what keeps it all green and beautiful.
Okay, so Carol is asking about extending for another week in the area in France. Do you have suggestions for lodging, things to do? That might. So of course we'd love it if you extended with an untour in Provence or Alsace or Paris for that matter, and Dodge could help with that. But James, do you have? James, do you have any particular suggestions that you like to give folks who want to extend?
Really, yes, in as much as if you're coming all this way, it would be a shame just to come on my boat. And typically, the format will be people will come, for example, to come to Paris, maybe sometime in the prior week, and spend some days in Paris, and often, or come straight aboard the boat and spend some time in Paris, or if you're flying out of Geneva, or it's kind of over to you. Very much with our Antipodean visitors, where they're coming from Australia and New Zealand, I mean, that's talking 10, 12-hour flying time, they will always probably make it part of a 3-week tour where they do various things, which we kind of tend to be the special bit in the middle that they've come for, but they'll pack it out a little bit. But I ski every year on the West Coast. I go to Whistler, and the same adage applies. It's a shame to go for a week. And really, if you're going to go all that way, 2 weeks is a nice period of time to do it, or even longer.
Yeah, great. Dodge, did you have anything to add to that? Anything that's worked really well for folks as extensions to the Savoir Vivre?
I'm actually surprised that a lot of people just do the Savoir Vivre
Is that right?
They may have alternative plans. But for the most part, I'd say Paris is always at least part of it. One of the reasons is logistically, as James will note, it's not very easy to get from Dijon back to Paris to fly home. So if anything, at the least a few nights in Paris at the end of your stay is worth it. Obviously, you could consider Lyon or somewhere en route. If you're going the opposite direction, you certainly could consider, like Brian mentioned, Untour, either in Provence or go to Alsace. But if anything, Paris always seems to be at least a point destination for coming and going as far as the barge is concerned.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's go to the next question. Deb and Rob. Hi, Deb and Rob. How does it work to ride a bike along the way?
Oh, it's critical. Thank you for this question, because it's a critical question. The great thing about canals, if you're cycling next to a canal, you never have to go up the hill because the canals are perfectly flat. So and all canals have a towpath next to them, either in asphalt or in a perfectly smooth like a pea gravel top. And we have 8 bikes aboard. And guests at any time when we're cruising along the canal, typically every 20 odd minutes of cruising time, or even less, we'll come to a lock. So one of the most joyous things to do on canal cruises is maybe enjoy breakfast as you're underway going through the countryside. And then when you're at a lock, is to jump on a bicycle and go for a ride along the towpath. They're perfectly, it's very, very safe, very, very smooth, very, very, typically very flat. And then there's also little villages and little places to explore along the way. And then simply what you do is you cycle along, and then when you're ready to get back on the boat, you can wait at a lock, and within 10 minutes time, the boat will be along. And whilst we're putting the boat either up or down the lock, depending on our cruise direction, the crew will help you get the bike back on board. But we have 8 guests, so therefore we have 8 bikes. I would say that it's extremely rare for bicycles not to come out every week, but it's also quite rare for all 8 bikes to go out once a week. But we have them available on board. Also, if you're a really keen cyclist and you want to go for a more meaningful ride, either into the hills or off-road, then we have an association with a local bike company, and we can hire you a road bike or a mountain bike for the week if you need some serious equipment to really head off into the hills.
Okay. Debbie asks, are there choices on the menus for lunch and dinner?
Great question. There are, I mean, every lunch service is curated for our guests, so that our chef knows what we like, but there'll typically be a quiche and some salad, a pièce de résistance, and a starter, and also something for dessert. That is as a fixed menu, but choices within. And before you come, we take dietary requirements. So if there's anything that's off the menu, then we can always provide that to the chef. In the evening, it depends on the restaurant. Some of our restaurants, for example, when we go to Le Petit Repère du Go, the creperie, it's just a la carte, have whatever you like, and explore what an authentic creperie is like. Other restaurants, typically the more formal ones, we have what's known as a barge menu, which is a menu but with choices, which you're elected to choose from. Same for the wine. Wine is included with dinner, and depending on where we're going, we will either be generally we'll pick the wines for guests. But if you have a preference, then we will be able to order a wine that will be to your liking. But in terms of the dining, it depends throughout the week, and it works terrifically well. But if you have any dietary restrictions or preferences, then just need to let us know on the passenger information docs that you send us, Brian.
Okay. Connie asks, do you arrange for roommates if someone travels alone?
What a great idea. No, but we should. Happy to consider it. Absolutely. But we do a single occupancy supplement system, but that's a new one. And if Untours like to try it, and Connie would like to try it, then yeah, why not?
Okay, yeah, that's Dodge, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, we have tried, to be honest, as far as Untours is concerned, to do something similar, and it's never worked out. We actually at one point had, I'm not sure where the title came from, but a singles club. Which unfortunately did not work out. Part of the it might be easier with the Savoir Vivre since it's a very singular thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas with our own tours, 20 some odd destinations, very difficult to have 2 people like-minded, want to go to the same place, same time, and even want to be together with somebody else. So it's a difficult thing, sadly, since I know single travel can be expensive. But if the request ever comes, I'm happy to do what I can to put people together.
And single supplements are only $1,500, as I understand it. Is that right, James?
They are till next year. We're going to put them up later this year.
Okay, so
I mean, really, as I ever say to my friends after a glass of wine, that it's never more expensive than running without somebody in every room. I want somebody in every room. I want people on board. Yeah, there's some certain commercial realities we have, but we're still going at 1,500 single supplement.
Okay.
Happy to honor that, but we're going to be changing that for 2023.
Okay, great. Is wine included in the price? The question is from Mary Kay.
Yes, Mary. Sorry if I wasn't more clear. Yes, everything's included in the price. We specialize in having Burgundian wines aboard. We will buy wines from other regions as well, just for variety. But in terms of the wines we have aboard, they are Village and Premier Cru quality wines. And we've long established relationships with some neat winemakers who sell us their wine where you can only buy it from either a couple brokers or their cellar door. It doesn't end up in restaurants or well, maybe in some restaurants, but certainly not in the supermarkets or anything like that. So we have nice relationships with small exclusive producers.
Great. Shirley would like to know more about the route. Do we come back to where we started?
Another great question. One slide I didn't show you, which is an itinerary slide, but I moved on. We cruise point to point, and we cruise from just outside of Dijon, either from a Plombier-les-Douches or Fleury-sur-Ouche, and Fleury is a village on the Ouche Valley, and that's on the southern point. And we go to the furthest, as far north as we can, which is to a place called Écombe, which is past Auxois, the village where the chateau is. And it's at the very top of the canal, where there's like an open area, and actually at the top there's a tunnel that goes through a mountain, and then that's actually the very, very top of the Burgundy Canal. And on the northern stretch of the Burgundy Canal, we're on the southern stretch, which is arguably the more beautiful and better accessed for things to see and do. But on the northern stretch, then the canal goes down again. So on one week, we're going up the canal to the very top, and then we rotate the ship, and then we start another week. So you go point to point, but you never see anything twice, and there's no turning halfway through the week or anything like that.
Great.
Interesting, just to finish that, in terms of transfer times, it's quite, again, a little gift of the Ouche Valley, is that because of its shape and the road system in France, from arriving from Dijon to our first port of call, it's about a 20-minute transfer. And then, because it effectively does a V shape and there's an auto route just where we need it, even at the furthest edge of our cruise, at the top of the Ouche Valley, it's still 40 minutes back to Dijon. So we have these relatively, once you hit Dijon, you're as good as aboard, and there's not very large distances for the transfer.
Okay. Shirley would like to know, can you accommodate food allergies, such as gluten-free?
Yes, just as long as it's on the passenger information document, we need to capture it as much detail as possible. Then the chefs will accommodate you to the best of your abilities. One thing that is true in France is that they took them a lot longer to get into vegetarianism, and they took them a bit longer to go into listening to food allergies. Famously, there was a chef on another barge hotel. He just joined a barge hotel, and it's a reputable boat. He was a very high-end chef. He said, "Sir, we have a vegetarian aboard." He said, "No problem." So he served the salad, and there were just a few lardons of ham on top, but only a few because they were vegetarian. So it's like, no. So, France is French, and their food culture runs deep. But in terms of modern France and looking after affluent and sophisticated North American travelers, they're all set. They understand the importance, and the days of lardons on vegetarian salads are gone.
Great story. Vicky asks, is there an adjustment for passengers who do not drink alcohol at all?
In short, no. And this is it's a burden I bear. We invite, and typically speaking, people who come aboard the Savoir Vivre will have some wine, and others will not. And it's one of those ones where I've looked at every alternative, like how we manage the bar and things like this. And really, we've decided works best for the Savoir Vivre. And I'm sorry, it's not exactly the answer you're looking for. You're welcome to enjoy all and everything that's aboard that boat. But in terms of catering to discounting for particular dietary or drinking preferences, we've elected not to.
Okay. Connie says, I use a cane for balance. Is that a deterrent?
I can only answer this as I'm not an occupational therapist, nor a physiotherapist, nor a medical practitioner. But in terms of the practicalities of being on a barge hotel, some things I can tell in terms of accessibility and how we found favor with specialist brokers such as yourself, Brian, over time, because people have been aboard and experienced it. A cane is no problem. Other things that are useful to Savoir Vivre is that typically barges, if I may be a bit of a geek for a second, they're built out of old barges, and they're old commercial barges, and they're maximally, their hulls are very square shaped. Now, the canals, typically with silting, have something of a U shape to them. So it means that the barge hotels get alongside as close as they can to alongside, but often because of the silting, there might be a 2 or 3 meter gap. If you look at your presentation for the Savoir Vivre, you'll notice that the Savoir Vivre always sits right next to the canal side. And that's because the Savoir Vivre, incidentally, is not a conversion of one of these old barges. This is a purpose-built ship. Its hull was built in 2006. So whilst it looks like a barge, it's a modern vessel, and we built it to modern engineering standards in 2008 or 2007. The hull was built. And whilst we had the opportunity of designing a new vessel, we put a V-shaped hull on it, which means as we come alongside, actually the Savoir Vivre comes alongside the canal very close compared to other barge hotels. We have the shortest gangway in barging. Once aboard, there's 2 treads down onto the foredeck. And also you will be able to handle 3 treads up to the wheelhouse for one more, because the canal is slightly higher. We enter from there. But if you're, so we're not disabled adapted, but the practicalities of it is that the Savoir Vivre moors nicely against the canal side. We have a short gangway, and even with low stability, you do it all the time. Both, the captain will take both hands and walk you across so you have stability in terms of getting on and off the ship. Once aboard the ship, it is flat. There is no steps into the bedrooms, no steps into the showers, no steps into the bathroom. It's all on one level. One other thing, just for people over here, just because we're on a boat and it floats, when cruising on canals, there's a lot of movement. We don't get waves, we don't get wind or tide, we don't get that. It's a very, very flat experience. The only time we'll move a little bit is when we're going up in the canal, which is when we enter an empty lock, and they close the doors behind the boat, and then they have to fill that lock. And as the water's coming in, sometimes the boat can just move slightly back side to side within the canal as it's going up the lock. But really, people who get travel sickness or unsteady on their feet, they're really, although you're on a boat, it's a very sedate, very flat experience.
Okay, Peter and Rona would like to know, is August vacation ever an issue?
No, but that's a really interesting question. It comes around again. I mean, the long held I think it's held in North America more than elsewhere, but there's a long held and old tradition that France shuts down in August. And that's when everyone in France jumps in their cars and they go to the South Coast. It is long evolved past that now. We are, we cruise out throughout August, available in August. And Dijon is a tourist town in itself, both for domestic and international visitors. So it is really so much the case in terms of large industrial, on an industrial level, perhaps as seasonal factory closures. That really doesn't affect tourism, and it doesn't affect our tourism. In fact, to a certain degree, the inside line was, it's a great time to go to France because everyone thinks it shuts down, but it doesn't. So it's actually a good time to it's an interesting question. Now and again, yeah.
Okay, we're having a little bit of choppiness on the audio at the moment, James, but we're going to forge ahead, and I think everybody heard most of what you said.
Yeah.
Natalie asks, she asks if gluten-free options are possible. You said yes. I think that we've answered. Rick, are cruises ever interrupted by low water levels? And what is the total distance covered?
Fabulous. Okay, total distance, I'm going to say about 50 miles over the week, but I'll have to check that. Bear in mind, when we're cruising out on the canal, we're cruising 3-4 miles an hour, and we're not in any rush, and it's all about just enjoying the pace and the view. And then whenever we enter a canal, it's about a 10 or 15 minute process going up the canal. And one of the things that we live by on the Savoir Vivre is you only move the ship when guests are aboard. Sometimes if people are trying to make a certain destination, they'll wave the guests off on a cruise, on a tour in the afternoon, and then they'll move the ship without guests aboard. We really only want to move the ship. We've got this very beautiful section of canal, and we only stick to the good bits, the very, very top, down to Fleuret-sur-Ouche or onto Plombier-sur-Ouche. So I think it's circa 50 miles. I have to check that. I haven't counted recently. And water levels. Okay, just for everyone's benefit, the canal is powered by a reservoir, and at the top of the Ouche Valley, near Auxerrois, there is a large reservoir. and it's really fall to fill. And then throughout the year, as we're processing, as ships move along, they open and close these locks and fill the box up. It taxes the two things are if there is a dry one, and there was one 2 years ago, funny enough. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay, sir? I've just got a internet connection unstable.
Yeah, we're having a little trouble, but go ahead.
Sorry, it's my fault. Okay, but the upshot is that the water level on the top pound of the reservoir can reduce, and what is that they have to manage the the canal. The two things they do are they lower the level of the pool height in each pound. They lower the level, so each lock they fill uses less water, and then in the very extreme cases they will shut the canal. This has happened once, because it happened to the first time to me 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, where there was a low water supply, and towards the end of the season, they started reducing the level. Now, this is one of the Savoir Vivre's unique, for people who are boating people out there, typically a barge hotel, the full-size ones, they'll go between 1.6 or 1.8 or 2 meters underwater. As they reduced that water level a few years ago, they were unable to stay on the canal because there was a depth issue about being able to float. The Savoir Vivre, as I explained, has a V-shaped hull, and we draw only 90 centimeters. So we are uniquely capable of keeping cruising when they reduce the pound. On very rare occasions it's happened. But so whilst there was I think it was 2 years ago, and where they actually had to reduce the pound level a bit, and a number of first of all, we'll keep cruising, going on to the River Somme and doing a river cruise. The Savoir Vivre was able to keep cruising because of our narrow draft was able to keep going, whereas those with a deeper draft had to go somewhere else because otherwise they're at risk of hitting the bottom. I just answer the question. These are wonderful questions, by the way, and they're very informed. It did happen. Now, especially after COVID, I think there's more water in that reservoir than there has been in decades. So I certainly know that 2022 has every sign of being an extremely good year for when the water level up.
Great. Let's see. Kimberly is asking if there's an option to explore the area by foot. I'm not quite sure how you're going to answer that one, but take a crack at it if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, every day. I mean, we're always able to explore on foot from the Savoir. For example, if we came to a lock and you want to go walking, again, it's a staple of barging is walking. All you do is walk ahead of the boat. So whatever direction you're going in, you walk forward. If you walk at a normal pace, then you'll stay ahead of the boat because the boat only goes. We cruise at 3 or 4 miles an hour, and then we stop for the locks. So you can walk extensively, and the method you do is just walk ahead of the boat. There's also down times either before, after tours, or when we've come to our mooring for lunch, and opportunities to walk into villages. The villages were built and born out of canals. So the canal always has a position because all these little barges and places that to visit were built because of the canal. So you can always walk in. There's hills nearby. Get up some paths and things like that. The crew all live on or in the valley, so if you want any tips as to where to go, they're on hand to tell you which way to go.
Okay, so finally, Sue-Ann LePage asks, what is the canal you travel?
It is well, in English, the Burgundy Canal, or in French, the Canal de Bourgogne. The Canal de Bourgogne has 2 sections. It has a southern section and a northern section. The southern section, it goes from the River Somme. It comes off the river, and that's where it starts. It goes via Dijon, and after Dijon, it turns into the Ouche Valley, which is this very beautiful valley we cruise along. And then we go all the southern, we cruise that northern section of the southern canal, essentially from Dijon up to Écom, which is the very top, and that's where the tunnel is. And at the other side, you're then on the north section of the Bourgogne. Within the whole of barge cruising, France is by far and away, it represents probably 80%, 80% of all barge cruising takes place in France. And within France, the major regions that cater to barge hotels is the Burgundy Canal, and then also the Canal du Midi, which is further south. They're all, you know, I love the whole industry, and we're all a community. Arguably of those, the biggest, the most popular area is the Burgundy Canal. So the Savoir Vivre is if you're going to do cruising once, I suggest doing the canal, and that's exactly where we're located. When people come back, you can try from boat or a different region, or in your case, they come back with different friends.
Okay, one last question from Carol. How many barges are on the canal at the same time?
Oh, I'm guessing this is going to be regarding on the Burgundy Canal.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say there's probably a interesting. When you speak to somebody who lives in Burgundy, they say, "Oh, there's so many barge hotels on the Burgundy Canal," and then you go to the Burgundy Canal and you see one a day, maybe. So to the locals, they regard a lot as being a lot. But typically speaking, you'll pass maybe one or two other barge hotels a day. It's actually pretty convivial and quite fun. You can give everyone a wave. It is a long, thin community on those barge hotels. And you'll find that as you cruise, when we're meeting other boats, that they're meeting like friends, because one guy maybe was even working on the other boat previous week, helping with an engineering issue, or somebody may have a problem. We're all in it together. So whilst we are technically competitors, no room for competition on the boats. They're all there just to deliver fabulous cruises. But I think there's about a dozen or 15 along the Burgundy Canal, which you can consider that you're going to be there for a week, and you travel, 4 or 5 miles of it a day. Your interaction with other boats is quite rare, but and actually fun. It's fun seeing other boats, and everyone's, by the way, no matter what boat you choose, your boat's always the best. Everyone's always proud of their boat, which I'm always very happy about.
Great. Well, on that note, thank you very much, James. This was a lot of fun, and based on the questions, I think you've got a lot of interest here.
Yeah.
We will be sending out a replay, a video of this presentation. So watch your email in the next hour or two. We hope to have the video ready for you. So keep an eye on that. Otherwise, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Dodge. Thank you, James. And
everyone,
have a good night or have a good afternoon.
We must do another one soon, okay? We'll do another one soon sometime.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.